Hey, welcome back. If this is your first time here, you don't need to catch up or understand anything perfectly. You can just arrive right here as you are. So, today, I want to talk about what happened after everything clicked. And just like a little side note, I'm feeling a little stuffy, so I apologize for that. Um, so after everything clicked, not the realization itself, but the emotional fallout, because clarity doesn't always feel clean. Sometimes it's like you're standing in the middle of a room that suddenly rearranged itself when you had your eyes closed. So after that night, after the recognition, the validation, the panic, I expected to feel lighter. And in some ways, I did. But what was the most surprising was how quiet I felt after. Like, not a peaceful quiet, not settled, just really still. Like, I didn't know what to do next. My system didn't know what to do next because the story that I had been telling myself for my whole life suddenly didn't apply anymore. I remember going about my daily life with this new understanding, just sitting right beneath the surface. And I remember like watching myself react to things and thinking, oh, there it is. Makes so much sense now. But instead of relief, the feeling that was surfacing was grief. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't just come at me all at once. It showed up in flashes here and there. There was grief for how long I blamed myself, grief for how much I pushed through when I was already overwhelmed, and grief for all the times I thought and told myself that I was failing when really I was just like compensating. And there were moments that I felt sad for younger versions of myself in a protective way. Kind of like, you didn't deserve to work that hard just to exist. And I didn't even know at first that I was grieving. I just felt heavier, more emotional, more tired, more sensitive. Um, Clarity had opened the door, and grief was right on its tail, right behind it. The relief was there too. It was just a lot quieter than I thought, and showed up in smaller moments. Like, I could now catch myself before starting to spiral and noticing that I was becoming overwhelmed before reaching the point of no return. It showed up as more of a gentleness and a permission to stop asking, what the hell is wrong with me? And start asking, what do I need right now? What can help me in this moment? Um, the relief was more grounding than celebratory. Like, I was finally able to grasp at something or to feel something solid underneath me, supporting me after years of bracing for the next impact moment. Um, yeah. So, um, one of the strangest parts was how much my past kept coming back to me. Memories that I hadn't thought about in years were suddenly relevant. There are times I wrote off as being awkward or dramatic or just like plain embarrassing, and they started to look a little different. I was replaying conversations, going over lots of relationships, conflicts, not not to judge myself, but to better understand um, myself and what I was going through during those times. Um, and a lot of time coming to that understanding hurt, yeah, because it meant acknowledging how often I asked myself to do something that might have not actually been in my best interest, um, because I thought it was the right thing to do, or how often other people would say or do things that weren't weren't really in a friend way, like I might have thought they were. I just had a lot of sadness. There wasn't really any anger, just a sadness and more compassion and a lot, a lot of processing just quietly by myself, to myself, on my own. And I also had this sudden urge to get it all figured out, like right away. I was reading everything I could read, looking for so many resources, just trying to figure it out and reorganize my whole life overnight, basically. Um, so I had to slow down a little bit because even though clarity might create some kind of urgency, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready to take it on all at once or in the way that I was going about it. I wasn't suddenly required to change who I was. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone, and I didn't owe anyone a new version of me. What I needed to give myself was just time, time to let this new understanding, time to settle, um, time to feel what I hadn't allowed myself to before, and time to rebuild trust within myself. Um, there was a period that lasted a lot longer than I expected where I didn't feel lost, but I was definitely disoriented. Kind of like reading a map upside down for your whole life and someone being like, hey, that's upside down. So now you have to figure out how to read it the right way. Which way is up? Do I even know that yet? I don't know. Nothing in my environment has changed. My job didn't change. My relationships haven't changed. But I changed. So I had to learn how to integrate my new self into this life that already exists for me. And there were some times that I felt clear and grounded, and days that I felt really unsure, really tender and raw. And it's all part of the journey. What really began to change was how I treated myself and how I currently treat myself, I guess. Instead of controlling my reactions, I started to listen to them before letting them out. Um, Instead of pushing through discomfort, I'm pausing more. Instead of demanding answers, I am allowing questions. My healing isn't, it doesn't look like fixing. It's more like a softening of expectation, a softening of self talk, and a softening of the pressure to perform quote unquote normal. So at first, very unfamiliar. I felt very unsafe to allow that softness, but over time, it's becoming steadier than the self criticism was. And I don't think this part gets talked about enough. The part after recognition, before clarity turns into wisdom. The middle space between where you were and where you're settling into is quiet, it's slow, sometimes it's a little bit ugly, but it does matter because this is where self trust starts to rebuild, not through answers, but just paying attention and listening to yourself. So, if you're in this space right now, after a realization, after something finally makes sense, and you feel heavier instead of lighter, nothing is wrong. Grief and relief often arrive together, and clarity does not erase the past. It just helps you hold it differently. You don't need to rush this part, you don't need to fix anything. And sometimes healing looks like letting yourself just feel what you finally have the language for. And with that, I thank you for being here with me. And next time, I'm going to talk about masking and my experiences surrounding that and recognizing and overcoming.